Podcast.
There's a quote that is being passed around the internet. You may have seen it because it somewhat has to do with podcasters. It is by Seth Rogen, and he says this: if you don't want to go through the process, you shouldn't be a writer. The idea of a tool that makes me write less is not appealing to me because I like writing. Can you relate? I can. I got a ton of notes about this as it relates to podcasting, and we are going to dive into that here on this episode is Big Podcast Playbook. Grow your podcast, build your audience. That's what I talk about here, how to get more people to your podcast, make more money with your podcast, make a podcast that people care about, and make a podcast that people would miss if it disappeared. You can find me at bigpodcast.com, and that's a good place to go if you're wondering, who is this guy and why should I listen to him? Go there, bigpodcast.com. Let's dive into it. When was the last time that you actually enjoyed podcasting? Let's start there. I am doing radio 5 days a week. When I'm not doing radio, I'm doing podcasting. I do podcasting multiple times a week. So that's a lot of time in the studio, me in the editing bay, me doing booking, me doing episode notes, publishing episodes, thinking about episodes, thinking about how to market episodes, all the things that come beyond just being on the mic. And I will say this, there are some things about podcasting or radio or broadcasting or recording audiobooks that I like more than others. But in general, right now I'm in my 5x8 tricked out closet. I love this. I find that when the world is out there and it's chaotic and I need a break from it, I can step in the studio and have my time on the mic, narrating what I've outlined previously, doing interviews, doing production. I love this stuff. I like sitting with the idea. In this case, this quote by Seth Rogen: if you don't want to go through the process, you shouldn't be a writer. The idea of a tool that makes me write less is not appealing to me because I like writing. I like sitting with that, thinking about it, thinking about my relation to that, and thinking about your relation to that, because people come to me for what I just talked about earlier: how to grow a podcast, get more people to your show, make a podcast that people care about, make a podcast that makes money, and make a podcast that people would miss if it were gone. That is the job. The reason I connected with this quote, and I haven't done any research beyond looking at the quote. Again, I'm looking at my life through that lens and the life of people like you, people who listen to this podcast, because I talk to you and what you have said to me, how you're relating to something like that. I think that he's talking about things like AI. So just to be clear, I'm not anti-AI. I'm working on a project right now. This is a daily radio show where I am booking 5 guests per day, a live 3-hour news show 5 days a week. It is guest heavy. I am one guy. I have resources, but they are limited. Something like AI when it comes to research or what angles we can go based on talking points or based on a bio or based on topics. A tool such as ChatGPT or Claude, that makes prep a lot easier for me, just like Google would make prep a lot easier for me. There was a time maybe I would go to the library, the microfiche, look for news articles, look for books that were written on something, make calls. Hey, do you know this guy? Do a bunch of pre-interviews, not just with the guest, but with other people. That's not really possible with the deadline that I'm working on. Probably what would have happened in the past, because of limited tools or the analog tools that we had, we wouldn't be able to do this volume of work. So that's one of the advantages of AI. One person, a whole lot more effective, a whole lot more productive than you used to be. But is it as good a show? I don't know. Sometimes you do want to sit with something. I like what Seth Rogen is saying. I'm an author myself. I've done several books. I've got a new one coming out. It took me years to do it. I like sitting with it. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into what sitting with it means for something like a book or a podcast, because it is going to make you better. It is something that an audience, in this case you, are going to be able to connect better to when you compare that to something that was generated by AI. The reason people come to me is because of what I just said. I am on the radio daily. I'm producing a news show daily. I'm producing a morning radio show daily. I'm producing this podcast, arguably every week or so. I've got a syndicated music business show. I'm living and breathing radio and podcasting and audiobooks. I think about it when I wake up. I think about it when I go to bed. I'm living it in the in-between time. That enables me to connect with somebody like you, a podcaster, in a much different way than somebody who wasn't doing that, or a computer, an entity who's not even a person and is definitely not doing that. I get that not everybody who has a podcast, maybe you, doesn't have that kind of connection with audio or radio or podcasting itself. I have loved radio since I was a kid. I was that kid with baby monitors pretending to have a radio station. I was that kid who would listen to radio over watching TV or over watching other forms of entertainment. I have always loved radio. Not everybody has that connection. And because of that, there are people that think, oh, well, radio would be good or podcasting would be good. I've heard this podcast thing. Everybody seems to be doing well with podcasting because we only see the people that are doing well. I think I'd like to have that, but they don't know what's involved. So I get it. When you think about AI and these shortcuts and tools and things that are available to us, there is an allure of a shortcut because content creation, it's a machine, man, especially if you're doing any kind of social media. A lot of social media companies, let's say agencies, we'll call them that. You sign on with them and they're going to grow your audience. The first thing they're going to do is to tell you to publish more. Why? It's a shortcut, man. The more stuff you put out there, the more likely you are to be seen. You've got these little tiny soldiers, these videos, clips, tweets, whatever you want to call them, whatever kind of social media we're using at the time. The more you put out there, the more likely they are to reach somebody. In theory, yeah, there's the algorithm. And yeah, there's quality. But in general, the bigger your output, as far as volume, the more likely somebody is to see it. And who creates it? You. I talked about being a one-man show. And again, I'm not exactly a one-man show, but I'm doing a lot. We're talking hosting, production, editing, research, writers. I'm a social media manager, email marketer, community builder. I'm an analytics guy. I'm a sales guy. I've got a personal brand that I work on. That's you. So you're not just making an episode. You're making the episode, the clips, the captions, the transcript, a blog post, a tweet, or whatever we're calling tweets now, the short form stuff, a LinkedIn post. You've got quote graphics. You've got the graphics for LinkedIn, for Facebook, for Instagram, a YouTube description, and that thumbnail. You get these guys arguing, we need to A/B test this thumbnail. You got to get into analytics and testing things. We used to not do that. We're doing it now. It's not as easy as throwing something out there like in the old days. You talk to these old guys, and I'm talking about people like me. People have been in podcasting for a while, 2005, if you're curious, over 20 years. The old podcasters, man, you used to be able to put something out, hockey stick growth. Everybody jumped in on it. It's like, yeah, kind of. Our numbers weren't that accurate. We had a lot of downloads, a lot of bots. Nothing was really connected to them. We didn't have the ways for people to respond to like we do now. But it seemed like a lot of people were interested in what we're doing. There was certainly less competition. So if you did have somebody who happened to know what an iPod was and could get a podcast to it, or happened to know how to listen to your podcast via a desktop computer, there were opportunities for you that might not be available today because there is so much competition. Because there is so much competition and we are expected to do all these things, the writing, the research, social media management, email marketing, all the things that I listed, the promise of AI, and again, this is a general pool that I'm putting AI into, the promise of AI is relief. Hey, man, you as one person can get more done with these tools. We're going to give you faster outlines. We got your episode notes taken care of, your episode summaries. Yeah, we got them, man. Auto-generated timestamps, clip selection. I know a guy, he's taping all sorts of stuff. He did a 36-hour run. Can you imagine that? Correction, maybe 32 hours. I don't know. All I know is he had 4 8-hour days of content that he was recording. Dumps it into AI. AI gives him the clips. Are they good? I don't know, but he's one guy. Can you imagine the time that it would take for you to go through 32 hours of video and get those clips and do those captions? I get why he's doing it. But don't confuse volume for quality. It doesn't mean that it's good. It just means you're cranking out more volume. Regardless, all that volume, AI promises relief. Scripts, questions, title ideas. You can program AI, and I use AI episode notes. If you want to see an example of this, podcast.bigpodcast.com. Are they edited before they go out? Yeah, they're edited. But I'll throw this episode or any other episode that I do for this podcast, Big Podcast Playbook, into an AI tool. I use Cast Magic. I've programmed it or given it directions. I don't know if it's actually programming for the kind of episode notes that I want. It spits them out. I can edit them. I don't really worry about episode notes for the record. Are they important? Yeah, maybe. But what I've found is that most podcast listeners, they're just that. They're listeners. They're not really looking at episode notes. I want episode notes there as a complete package, but I don't think for a minute the SEO is really important with these episode notes. People are finding me via Google. I don't mess with that. I think that with all the stuff that we have to do as content creators, in this case, podcasters, all the stuff that I'm talking about, email marketing, getting people to the show, booking guests, doing research on guests, questions for guests, pre-interviews for guests, all of that, the episode notes, they're important. You want something there, but that can be outsourced. And that is a nice shortcut. I'll talk a little bit more about that later in this episode because, some things you are going to outsource to AI. But again, that process, the stuff that Seth Rogen is talking about, the writing, or in this case, the creating of the podcast, voicing your podcast, outlining it, having your signature on that podcast, that really can't be replicated. I've seen guys try to actually do that. Hey, man, I'm just going to put my voice and some samples of my voice into an AI podcasting tool. I'm going to have that tool write a script. I'm going to have it voice the script. I've got an instant podcast and I don't have to do any work, not step into a studio, not record anything. You can do it, but it's not going to be like this, where it is me capturing a moment in time going out to you. And your listeners are going to know that. To wrap this first part of the episode up, I think for most podcasters, we're not lazy. The issue is that we are tired because of all those things that I'm talking about that we feel like we need to do. Do you need to do them? Again, like episode notes? Probably not. Video? No, you don't need it. A lot of people think that way because people like YouTube, that is a video company, are telling us that we need to have video. Of course they are. They're a video company. When all you got is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. All right, let's talk about the value of the process because this is what I think Seth Rogen is talking about. This is a man that likes writing. And I talked about this a bit earlier, in that the reason people listen to me, David Hooper, instead of other podcast consultants or whatever you want to call me, podcast gurus, is because I'm actually doing the thing. There's a difference between those who are doing the thing and those who are not doing the thing. Not just in the people that you listen to or read their books, but podcasters themselves. Process builds skill. The reason I know about podcasting is because I have been through the process. If you go through the process, you are going to know not only about podcasting, but also about what it is that you are talking about. When you really are doing the thing, you know what to leave out. You know how to rework a weak opening. You know how to rework a weak guest. I worked on a radio project. I was not the host. It would have been much different if I were the host. I was a producer on it. The host did not take control of the interview. This guest, we could call it a hijack, but he was one of those guys that you would ask the question and he would go for it. 15 minutes, not take a breath, not give you an inch to jump in there. Now me, I only need half an inch. I can jump in there. I'm not going to let you control my narrative, my show, my podcast. This host, he wasn't as good. He was trying to be nice. So we ended up with nothing. This guy just going on and on and on about a topic. You develop the ability to take control of a situation like that by being in those situations, learning from them, getting into them again, and not having the same thing happen. So you don't need to give him an inch. You just need that half inch to jump in. You can take that guest who doesn't have media experience himself, and that happens a lot with us as podcasters. A lot of times the guests that we interview, they don't have a lot of media experience. I'm always amazed at people talking about Diary of a CEO or some of these celebrity podcasts. Oh, this guy is such a great interviewer. She's so amazing at bringing these stories out. Well, yeah, of course these people are great at bringing stories out and great at interviewing because they're interviewing celebrities, one, with something to say, but two, that have done it, and three, that have media training so they know how to do it. You want a reason to work the process? This is the reason. You're going to be far more skilled than the average celebrity podcast host because you were used to taking control of situations with mediocre guests. And I'm not saying that to be mean to guests or to disparage anybody who would come on a podcast. I thank them for their time. But a lot of times they are there on a podcast because they don't have other options. Podcast is all they got. They're not on CNN or Fox News. They're not on major media. Major media doesn't necessarily want them. Major media is limited. Podcasts are not. In the trenches lets you control a bad interview. The reps matter. Stephen King talks about the first draft. That matters. Messy interviews matter. Those interviews that get hijacked by a bad guest, a guest that gets nervous and keeps talking and talking and talking and talking and talking, that matters. That's the reason for you to be in the trenches. AI, yeah, you can come up with something that maybe is better than you can do now, but you're not going to develop the skills that enable you to be that celebrity podcast host, or at least that bigger podcast host. I'm not saying you need to be a celebrity yourself or even interview celebrities. Somebody asked me, I'm working with this network right now, and there are a lot of celebrity interviews on it. And they said, would you be interested in jumping over here and doing some of this stuff? Because I've got experience with it with my music business show. We have, I wouldn't say it's like pop culture celebrities. Some of them have been pop culture celebrities. An example of that, like I've interviewed guys from NXS, Bad Company, Richard Marx, Rob Halford from Judas Priest. I interviewed Dolly Parton. I've interviewed a lot of celebrity musicians. And this guy was asking me, would you be interested in doing some of that work for this network? And I said, no, not interested. I like the real world, boots on the ground interviews. I like the gritty stuff. I want to tell human stories to human listeners. I don't care about who's dating who or celebrity type stuff. So maybe you're like me. You don't want to be there. You still want these skills. And that's what you're going to get. You're going to get timing, curiosity, taste, emotional pacing. You might have heard the Casey Kasem blooper. He's coming out of that upbeat number going into a death dedication, and he completely flips out, goes off on the producers. Don't do that. I'm saying it in nicer words than he said it. But that's emotional pacing. He understood that, and you don't get that from shortcutting the process. Here's the other thing that you get when you don't shortcut the process. You create your voice, man. You create those little things that you do that make your podcast you. And maybe it's odd phrasing, or maybe it's catchphrases, or maybe ways that you ask questions that other people don't. A lot of times you can tell AI, especially if you don't, I'm going to call it program it right, but do the right inputs. We see this stuff on LinkedIn all the time. The rule of threes, and it wasn't this, it was this, and that type of phrasing. We used to use it all the time for copywriting direct response messages. It worked well. It worked so well that AI started looking at it, and now everybody's doing it because of AI. But that's not their phrasing. That's phrasing they got from somebody else. What about you? I haven't talked about this on here, but, well, I'm going to talk about it now. Apple hired me to look at the way that I phrase things, not necessarily in a podcasting way, but they needed a guy about my age, middle-aged, white Southern guy. They were looking for specific demographics, and they came to me and they said, we need you to order a pizza, or we need you to get directions, or we need you to call somebody or look something up. They wanted to see how I phrase things. They wanted to look at my accent. They wanted to see if their voice technology could understand what I'm saying, because I've got a very unique accent, I guess, maybe kind of a slight Southern accent. I was born in Nashville, Tennessee. They're studying different accents, and they're studying different phrasing. That phrasing that I have, it is unique to me. You have a phrasing that is unique to you. Sense of humor that you have, unique. Your dreams, your wishes, your doubts, your values. Talk about the South. Woo, man, we got some values down here. We got some things that are good, some things that are not so good, but it influences who I am as a podcaster. Me being a little kid, pretending to be on the radio with the baby monitors, me being a little kid, listening to the radio instead of TV, that influences me. You don't get that when you shortcut the process. Bring yourself to the table. That's what's going to bring listeners to you. People want something real. That's the reason that YouTube is popular. I'm not saying you need to be on YouTube, but people consider something like that to be more authentic and more relatable than a lot of the stuff they're getting on a mainstream network. When you don't shortcut the process, when you're in the trenches, that is how you develop your voice. It's not just about what you say. It's about what you notice, what bothers you. It's about what you obsess over. You get something different when you listen to this podcast than you would another podcast on podcasting. And that comes from my background. That comes from middle-aged guy in the South. That comes from not only working in podcasting, but working in radio. I talked about the music industry. That's how I got into radio. It comes from my background in the music industry. All those things, stir them up. That becomes my background. And that is the lens that I view the world with. You've got that same thing. Go deeper into it. Bring out those things. You're not going to be able to do that if you rely too heavily on AI. I'm getting pitched so many author guests now. They say, oh, I've got a book. And it's this generic AI thing. It's got no real voice. It's got 10 tips to do this and 10 strategies to do that. It's not even connected to the author. I talked about Stephen King, that first draft. If you're interested in writing, but this would apply to your podcast as well, go read his book called On Writing. Stephen King did not just become Stephen King. Stephen King spent a lot of time working on short stories and doing, as he would say, the first draft, doing the grunt work to develop that voice. And what happened was, if we're going to talk about speed, and if we're going to talk about volume, he got to the point where he can knock this stuff out. Is his stuff today as good as it was back in the day? I don't know. Maybe it's better. Some parts of it are better, I'm sure. But the bottom line is, this man is still a skilled writer, and he got good by spending time on the mat, in the trenches, in the market, behind the mic, spending time doing the thing. An advantage you will get from actually doing the thing, and I feel this way when I end an episode, I feel this way when I finish a book, right? The end, and it is done after all the drafts, all the edits, when it is ready for publication. There's a sense of satisfaction that I completed something, whether it sells or not, whether it is read by other people or not. I know that I did the work to do that book. You might have heard this phrase, your first million, it's not about the $1 million that you earn, it's who you had to become to make that first million. That is a much different experience than winning $1 million in the lottery. It's who you become by doing the thing. There's a very specific type of pride and confidence that comes from accomplishing a great podcast or a great book or any great type of work that you do. And I see it all the time. I talked about those pitches from authors, quote unquote authors. There is a difference from somebody who has really put the time, energy, blood, sweat, and tears into a book, and somebody's like, oh yeah, John's got a book now. Oh yeah, AI did it, or a ghostwriter did it. There is a big difference. The guy who's lived it, the blood, the sweat, the tears, the emotion, getting back the draft with all the red ink on it, saying, nah, you got to start all over again. This new book I talked about, the podcast launch plan, I had to scrap the original one. Start all over again. I had this thing ready to go. It was for sale on Amazon. Got about 2 weeks from the release. This is a few years ago, because again, this thing has taken years. And I said, man, I can't do it. It's not where I want it to be. So I scrapped it. Maybe there were parts of it that ended up in the current version. I don't know. I mean, there's drafts and drafts and drafts. And usually when I have an idea, whether it's a draft of a blog post or a draft of a book, a chapter, an interview, maybe that I do, some raw tape, or even an episode like this, that may or may not be released. Not every episode that I record does get released. It finds its place eventually. But I knew that that wasn't going to be the thing. I had to start over again. And there's a pride from going through that process and knowing that you have done the thing to get it to where it is ready for release. I want to talk about some of the pitfalls of those of you who are using AI, and it could be me, it could be any of us. AI is a tool. It can help you with volume, the bulk of the work. It can give you some ideas you haven't already thought about. One of the things I've found out that it is amazing for is that it is great at looking at a lot of data at one time and seeing it as a whole. To go back to the book that I'm about ready to come out with, if I hire an editor, and I did work with a human editor for this book, because that's the process. I don't trust myself. I'm too close to it to do something without an editor. I want to have a different set of eyeballs on it. But I also had AI look through it, and AI can look at it, not just one word or one sentence, one paragraph, one chapter at a time. It looks at the whole thing and says, well, have you thought about this? That's great. What you don't want to do, though, is rely so heavily on AI that you're not checking it with another human person. You're not checking it with beta readers, which is also something that I did for this book. Probably a dozen beta readers. I don't remember exactly, but it was at least a dozen beta readers that went through it. I like this. I don't like this. And you take the feedback and you change it. AI, it's not going to give you that very human feedback. A lot of times AI is like, oh, that's a great idea. That's amazing. Thank you, David. You're paying for AI. There is a company that wants you to keep paying for AI. And if AI gives you pushback on every single thing that you do, even when you're paying for it, most people, they can't stand that. So a lot of times what AI is going to give you, for one, you're going to get the same episode titles that everybody else uses. There are these formulas. Like I said, they did this, and then they ended up with this. That same type of LinkedIn post, that same rule of three things. They do that with podcast episode titles too. You got predictable language. I use an AI tool on a show that I'm working with, and it says, in this heartfelt episode, blank, 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 blank. You know, it's a starting point, but you don't want to start every single episode note with that. In this heartfelt episode, safe opinions, recycled advice, that 10 tips thing, 10 strategies. You're going to have the same business strategies for entrepreneurs that the other guy is going to have. And there's not a whole lot of differentiation there. I talked about your personality, the background that you come to the table with. AI isn't seated at that table. The table of AI is the bulk of the world. It looks at all sorts of data. And because of that, you have this general kind of thing. 10 things that the world is not going to be offended by and that are safe for you. It's a lot like broadcast radio. No strong point of view, no pushback. That's the danger. Let me give an example of that. One thing you hear about in podcasting is consistency. And AI might say something like, well, today we're going to talk about the importance of consistency with your podcast. I'm not going to fight you on that. That's fine. But if I said something to you like that, it's not going to connect nearly like it would if I said something like, well, hey, consistency is great until it's Thursday night. You got an episode due on Friday. Your guest flaked on you. You're not really good at monologuing. You got to somehow record something, get it edited, and get it out within a few hours. And you've got something early the next morning that you've got to get in bed for. That is the start of something from a guy who has been there and done that, and that a listener is going to connect to a lot more than just the general advice. You know what you need to do? You need to give them a firm handshake and you need to polish your shoes. That kind of business advice. No. Other thing you got to watch out for AI, and this certainly happened with my book. I mentioned that I was running it through a few editing strategies, and they were helpful. But you've got me, who's been working on this thing for years. You got the human editor that I've worked with, and I trust his judgment. He's worked on a lot of successful books. And then I've got AI that's making me question my own judgment and question my editor's judgment. And I'm not against questioning stuff. I'm not against pushback. But the AI is saying something completely different. I don't know where it's getting its information. Is it coming from this bland place of 10 strategies for being a successful businessman? And number one is give him a firm handshake. Number two is polish your shoes. You got to be careful where you get any kind of feedback from. That's why I tell people, watch out for listener feedback. You don't know anything about most of these listeners you're listening to. You're going to hear feedback from somebody on Twitter or Facebook or email. Well, I don't like this. You need to do it this way. He's like, yes, sir, I do, because you want to be liked. But you don't know where that guy's coming from. Does he know anything about what you're talking about? And you know this if you've ever been in a podcasting group. I could get in a podcasting group, and keep in mind that I'm doing national radio. I've got a syndicated weekly show that's been online for over 40 years. And I've got thousands of podcasting episodes. I could get in a podcasting group on Facebook right now. I can say I'm recording into an RE20. I'm running it through this preamp. Here's my effects processor. Here's my interface. This is the software that I'm using. Giving a person some kind of advice or asking for advice, and somebody would say, no, you're doing it all wrong. Never mind that the RE20, the mic that I'm using, is arguably the number one mic in radio. Even if you think it's the Shure SM7B, the RE20 would be a close second. It's one of the two. And somebody would say, no, that's all wrong. No, it's not all wrong. There are ways to do things that are maybe different from what you were doing. It doesn't mean that you are doing something wrong. So you got to keep in mind that your own taste and experience, there is something valuable there. AI might make you start questioning it just the same way as if you were to go for anything that somebody said on Facebook. I've seen that happen. I've seen authors who are completely confident release a book on Amazon, get one bad review, and then reply to that review, oh, I'm sorry, the book didn't live up to your expectations. Let me get on the phone with you, see if I can convince you why I did things this way. No, you're not in the convincing business, man. Trust yourself. And that's the thing that you go against with AI. You start thinking, oh, this is a computer. It knows better than I do. No, it doesn't. Not necessarily. It knows what data it has been fed, just like any of us. Talking about being a middle-aged guy from the South, some of the data that I got, it's not accurate. The world is a much different place than a lot of the guys who grew up around here and were teaching me stuff. Trust yourself and question everything. If you don't do these things, your relationship with your audience gets thinner. You're going to sound less emotionally invested. You're not going to have your boots on the ground listening to the listeners that are talking to you or even being on the ground yourself. You're going to be trusting AI. Oh, AI knows better. I need to push back on this. Maybe AI knows something that I don't. No. I hope you can see how this is all connecting, because this goes back to what I was talking about earlier. The reason people listen to me, and you are still listening to this episode, is people know that I am in the trenches. They know that I get them. You know that I get you. You know that I understand your problem. You know that I've been that guy who's on a Thursday night without a guest, without anything recorded, without anything edited, that has to get that Friday episode out, that has to get in bed for an early morning the next morning. You know that I've been there and done that. You're not going to get that with AI. This generality can kill an audience connection. I think AI can be great if you want to get up to speed very quickly and give something that maybe with its help is going to be better than you could do at the very early stages of your career. And that's the problem that we run into. We think, oh, well, this is a quick way for me to get up to speed, quick way for me to get going. These outlines are tight. These ideas are tight. They're better than I could come up with on my own. But again, that first draft, sitting with these problems, that's what enables you to go really deep, deeper than AI can. AI, better than a lot of beginners, but it still has that superficial thing, the 10 tips, to give them a firm handshake and polish your shoes stuff. Let's talk about how to use AI. This is how I would use it. I like it for research. I like it for alternative title ideas. Hey, I've got a title called Grow Your Podcast with Paid Ads. Give me some title ideas, something like that. I think it's great for transcripts. I think it's great for general timestamps on episode notes. That can be helpful. Maybe pulling possible clips, but don't just let it go on its own. They got these automated tools. For every hour, we'll give you 50 clips to upload to social media. Don't trust that. If you want to summarize stuff, I talked about how it can take a lot of stuff at once, like that entire book. It can take your entire episode, give me a summary. It can be great for that. It can find gaps in an outline. Have you thought about adding this? That can be helpful. Oh man, I forgot that. You're not going to get everything. Again, this is because it looks at everything. You're just looking at one sentence, one paragraph, one segment at a time. When it's looking at everything, it can find holes. That's helpful. Where it's not going to be helpful, your opinions, it doesn't know your personal stories. It doesn't have your presence. It doesn't bring that thing that you bring, that middle-aged Southern male who asks for directions in a certain way or says things in a certain way. You know the car called the Altima? What is the maker of that car? Most people in the United States, they would say Nissan. Me, I say Nissan. I say it like an Englishman. And there are a few things that I do like that. Fidelity instead of fidelity. Maybe it's my music and audio background. It's those little things that separate you from everybody else. Don't try to be like everybody else. And that's what AI is going to do. But AI can look at your stuff. It can find holes. It can be great for idea generation. Don't rely on it too heavily. Certainly don't give it your editorial judgment. You know what you're talking about if you are boots on the ground in the trenches doing the thing. And that's the reason not to skip. If you want a long career in this thing, whatever this thing is, podcasting, but beyond podcasting, what your podcasting is about, you have got to be doing the thing. And I hope you enjoy it. If it's not enjoyable for you, go find that thing that is enjoyable. I cannot tell you, as a kid who used to listen to radio, who used to practice being a DJ on the baby monitors, not when I was a baby, but when I was a kid. That's the ways that I was at a yard sale, somebody in the neighborhood bought, it wasn't really a baby monitor, I call it that, but it was something that you would put on your desk and you would say, Rosie, get in here, I've got a dictation for you. Something like that, like a wireless intercom that was over the FM radio. I used to practice being a DJ on that. I thought it was fun. The fact that I am here now, years later, 40-something years later, doing the thing feels like a miracle, man, to wake up every morning and to be able to do this. I do not take it for granted. You've got your thing. It is possible for you to go out there and do something with it. Talked about my music business career. I thought, and this is maybe a sidetrack from when I was a kid pretending to be on radio, but it was music related. I thought that I was going to be a musician. I wanted to be Ozzy Osbourne's guitar player. Didn't work out. But I did spend 20-something years doing music marketing, part of that being radio and broadcasting. That's how I ended up here. There is a place for you in the industry that you want to be in. It may not be the place, but it is a place. And I would encourage you to look at that. Maybe podcasting isn't your thing. If it's not, great. What I like to do is I like to tell stories. I like to connect with people. I want to get a message out. And that's the parallel between what I did in music and what I'm doing with radio and podcasting and books. There are parallels within these things. So if it's not podcasting for you, but you like certain things about podcasting, maybe there's another place for you to go. I'm not, everybody needs a podcast. No, not everybody needs a podcast. Maybe you don't. I'm not an evangelist for podcasting. What I am is a guy who helps you spread a message. What I am is a guy who wants to see you do what you want to do. And you do what you enjoy. Like I said, it's something that I don't take for granted. I want to share that with people. Man, that's possible. That's possible. I know what it's like to not do what I want to do. There have been times in my life when I haven't been able to do what I want to do. Life's too short for that, man. This is my big takeaway for you. I would suggest you make fewer things with more care. That's the book for me. Yeah, I can do daily podcast and daily radio. I do that, but I look at that as reps for some of the other stuff that I do that's going to last a little while longer. The book, that's going to last a little while. The book arguably reaches more people in a bigger way because people hold on to it. People spend more time with it. People go back and they look at it as a reference book. That doesn't mean I'm an author first, but it goes back to that spreading a message thing. And it goes back to how can I have the most impact? Sometimes it's going to be podcasts. Sometimes it's going to be books. Maybe for you, it's YouTube. Maybe it's public speaking. You do you. I don't want to give you, like AI would, a bunch of ideas of you should do this and you should do this. You know what you need to do. Maybe it's podcasting. Maybe it's not. If you are into podcasting, I'm glad you're here. I talked about the book. It is called Big Podcast Launch Plan. That is coming out soon. If you want updates on it, bigpodcast.com. That is where to go. I've got a podcast. You were listening to it. You can subscribe to that podcast there. Bigpodcast.com/subscribe. That is the page to go to. You will find 3 links there. One for iPhone, one for Android, one is an RSS feed. You will be able to subscribe to this podcast, stay around as long as you want to, as long as it's working for you. You're more than welcome to listen to everything that I've got. I just published episode 701. Let's call this episode 702. That's just this podcast. I've done thousands of these and I'm still loving it. I want that for you. Hit me up at bigpodcast.com if you want to subscribe. Bigpodcast.com/subscribe. Thank you for listening to Big Podcast Playbook. If you have subscribed, I will see you on the next episode.